Good evening. I'd like to call the City of Mount Vernon Council Study Session to order. The time is now 7:03. I'll be filling in tonight as Mayor Pro Tem for Mayor Boudreau, who is joining us by Zoom tonight. Item A is on tonight's agenda is a presentation and update for the Mount Vernon Library Commons project. And we'd like to welcome our guest, Julie Blazik from HKP Architects. Julie, thank you so much for being with us tonight.
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor and Council. We're excited to be back again, presenting to you for, I think, the last time before we actually asked for permission to go out for bid. So I'm just going to run through a few highlights tonight. And before I get started, I just wanted to recognize a few people from our team and the team in general. Tonight we have Christine Baldwin. She's the project architect, leading most of the day-to-day operations and working her tail off. We also have Spencer Olsufka, Rochelle Hill, and Austin Miles in our office, along with a whole host of consultants that have been working really hard on this. So really proud of the whole team. And we're super excited about where the project is at. So let's, all right, Peter, which one did you tell me it was? Yep. So just a reminder, next week is National Library Week. So Isaac has a few things planned. We wanted to pitch that, make sure everybody's aware. And we'll be doing some promotional things on our end as well. Sorry. So I wanted to start off with schedule. Again, we're down here. This is our third presentation to council. We are at the end, basically, of our construction documents phase. We have about a month left. And Christine's going to go through some of the permitting aspects of what we have right now. But basically, we have about a month left to finish up construction drawings before they're ready to go out for bid. And we're getting our last bits of detailing and whatnot ready and coordinating with all of our team members. Right now, permitting looks like it's going to be about a 4 to 6 week process for the internal permitting. The SEPA, NEPA is in the hands of others. So that's the one that's in the kind of yellow bar there that we just don't have any control over. So that's one of the things that we're hoping won't take very long, but it could extend out. But assuming all goes well, we're planning on bidding in June. It'll be about a month of bid process. And then if we're approved to go forward for bidding would be about a month, and then a month after that, starting construction possibly. So that's as early as we could get out, and then if anything changes, we would adjust the schedule. Looking at about a 12-month construction schedule at the moment. On budget, we're working with a base bid for the building itself at just over $33 million. The soft costs are a little over 13, and that brings us to our total of $46.3 million. That's the budget we've been working with all along. We do have about $2.3 million worth of alternates that if extra funding comes in and bids come in, those could be accepted for a total of $49 million. And the way we've structured those are things that won't affect the overall performance or function of the building. They're sort of add alternates that enhance it. And so the project could move forward without them, but if extra funding comes along and you choose to take those alternates, you could add to the value of the project. And I'm happy to share what those alternates are with anyone after the meeting as well. I can provide a list. As everyone knows, OAC has been brought on as the construction management team. and we've been coordinating with them basically right from the beginning. They just finished up a constructability review of our 75% contract documents, so we're starting to look at their comments. They're in our weekly meetings now, and we're working with Kevin and his crew, coordinating all the aspects of the construction side of things. So it's been going really smoothly, and we're happy to have them on board. They'll also be working on a lot of the soft cost pieces. So from the city side, we'll be kind of concentrating on the hard costs, the bid costs, and they'll be helping to really identify and confirm all the soft costs that go along that 13.2 million. Couple of design updates. We are pleased to announce that we are meeting our passive house energy modeling compliance requirements. We can only use a certain amount of energy in order to meet passive house, and there's a lot of different components involved, and I won't go through the whole entire technical aspect of it, but basically if you get the 5 green check marks, you're on a path to compliance. So we're really thrilled. We've been working really hard to make sure that our envelope is up to the requirements that are necessary, that we're eliminating all the thermal breaks in the building, and meeting our energy requirements. We're also doing what's called therm and hydro modeling. So we're running our details through models that tell us if there's a risk for condensation and mold growth in any of the assemblies. So we run these to check and see how efficient the envelope package is in terms of insulating. And it also tells us where the dew point is in the walls, so we know if we've got any chance of condensation anywhere in the building, and we can address that. So that goes along, it's kind of hand in hand with the passive house design principles, but it's a double check on the building sciences to make sure that we don't have any envelope issues. And I'm going to let Christine take it from here and talk a little bit about some of the other aspects and where we are with design.
Well, good evening, and again, thank you very much for having us here. So I want to expand a little bit on some of the additional aspects to the project and where our areas of focus have been for the last several months. So to start off with, we've been working with our sustainability team to work through the life cycle analysis of the building and determine opportunities to improve the building from an environmental standpoint. So to start with, of course I clicked that button. To start with, we reviewed opportunities to reduce the global warming potential of the building, and one of the key areas that was identified in kind of analyzing the entire building was the concrete used in the building. Given that it's a parking garage structure, the structure itself is concrete, which has a lot of components and materials within concrete that have a high carbon footprint to them, if you will. So what we did was we studied various opportunities and different design mixes in order to optimize the concrete from a structural standpoint, but also in order to reduce the global warming impact. Another aspect of the project is incorporating EV charging stations. There's currently 3 different levels of EV charging stations incorporated into the project: level 1, level 2, and fast charge. And you can see the numbers there, the amount that are currently in the project, which will be included and constructed as part of the project. So we have a total of 76. And then the infrastructure is also being built in to accommodate a future 124 EV charging stations, which would bring the total to 200 in this building. In addition, we're also accommodating bike parking as well via bike lockers that can accommodate EV bicycles, since those are becoming more popular as a form of commuting. To touch a little bit on permitting, we are in the midst of permitting, and actually tomorrow we are meeting with the city planning staff at in the building department to go over the various permitting documents that are required for this project. What you see here on the screen is an example of what we will be submitting for the site plan permit and as well actually the signage permit as well. So a lot of documents that we're working to pull together, and we'll be meeting with them tomorrow to go over what aspects of the project are included in those and to move forward with them. In addition to the actual architecture of the building, we've been working with 3 different vendors for furnishings as a way to kind of understand what the options in terms of furnishings are that are out there right now, what makes sense for the library in terms of these specific spaces and how they're anticipated to be used, as well as the community center side. So part of this is working with them to understand what are the materials that are actually being used and how can we ensure that we're being conscious about the materials that are being selected from an environmental standpoint and a health standpoint, and also understand how durable the materials are, how comfortable they are, and how easy it is for staff to relocate them as needs change throughout the course of the library. And next I'm actually going to run through a couple perspectives here of the building. And I'm going to kind of try and recenter this ever so slightly so we get a little bit more of the bottom here. So we're going to kind of walk around the exterior, fly around the exterior, and then go through the interior spaces. But what you see here is an aerial view of the southeast corner. We see a terrace on the 2nd floor. I'm not sure if you can see my pointer. Yes, you can. All right, so we have a terrace located over here, a large PV or solar system on the south side of the building. That's producing a vast amount of energy that's being used by the building. And then we have the parking garage entrance here to the south. This is a little bit closer up of a view of the garage entry. And again, the PV panels and then the parking above. And then a south entry plaza down here to the right-hand side. This is the 2nd floor terrace that I pointed out. So there is a trellis structure that's incorporated, and that is actually one of the alternates that Julie touched on earlier in the presentation. And now we move to the interior of the building. So this is the circulation desk within the library itself. We're looking back towards the staff area and then essentially the checkout stations. This is a view from the circ desk out into the staff area and computer area. Then a view of the stacks themselves. One thing I want to note too here is the furnishings that you're seeing displayed in these are by no means the final selected furnishings. That's something that we're still working through with Mayor Boudreau and Isaac. So they're just placeholders for now. And obviously there's no books in any of these renderings, so it's also a little misleading. This is the young adult space. So currently right now, if you're familiar with the library, the young adults are kind of tucked away in a little corner. And now with the new library, they'll have a much larger space where they can be a little bit more autonomous and have space for studying and projects as well. This is the primary corridor that connects the library to the community center. A couple examples on the right-hand side are how we're addressing signage within the building, and the one I'm kind of hovering over right now is a donor recognition signage piece. This is the youth services space. If you're familiar with the library, you know how much of the library footprint is actually dedicated towards the smallest ones in our community, and they certainly are going to have a great space here in this library as well. They have their own dedicated circ desk and then various kind of spaces throughout for different kinds of reading, learn and play, and projects. This again is a photo taken from, or an image rather, taken from the other perspective of the youth services. And now we're kind of merging our way a little bit more towards the community center and the commons space. So the commons is what's bridging essentially the library on the west-hand side and the community center on the east-hand side. And that's what this image is representing. So it's intended to also serve as an overflow space for the community center itself. So what we see kind of beyond these glass, this glass wall, if you will, here, these tables and chairs are part of the community center. This is another view of that, but with the door open, so you can really get a sense of how the space can function as an overflow. And with that, I'd like to say thank you and open it up to any questions.
Any question?
I might have a question. Just to break the ice, I guess, huh? Well, first of all, thank you for coming by. Great presentation. The graphics are amazing. I mean, it looks like I'm looking at an actual picture, but I know they're graphics, right? So it's still very cool. The question that I have goes back to the total cost and just, is there any sort of a good pulse check right now going on right now, anticipating there's certain different CPIs that are going on for different categories, if there could possibly be a change to the total cost currently?
Great question, Juan. Things are very fluid right now out in the marketplace. We just talked to our cost estimator yesterday, and they've built in a lot of what they're seeing. So they're forecasting, last year was a 10% increase. This year's running about 5%. It is plateauing slightly, but time of year has everything to do with it. So we're also looking at when we put this out to bid, because your pricing will depend on whether people are really busy or not within the year too. So summertime could be more expensive than waiting a little bit. We want to, kind of look at that with OAC also and get their evaluation of it. The good news is inflation isn't quite as bad as it was last year, but it changes so quickly. Concrete strikes, have happened recently, so that influences things, and there's just a lot at play right now. So we're watching it, they're watching it, and we'll be advising the city all along the way.
Okay. Thank you. Best of success for tomorrow's meeting.
Yeah, great.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Melissa?
Thank you for your presentation, and what you say then is we have to move forward as soon as it's possible.
Yeah.
Other than that, the price is going to be completely unreachable, right?
Yeah, I think the longer, it's that balance of if you put it off any longer, it's still gonna cost more with inflation going the way it is. So the sooner we can get it out, the better. The month we put it out might have an impact on the overall price, but I think delaying it any more than that, you'd be looking at significant cost increases.
Julie, you mentioned at the beginning, you had a slide there where we were basically looking at about 46 million and 49 million. I know you said you could talk about that with us afterwards, but can you briefly just mention what that might be?
Absolutely.
What that looks like?
So Christine mentioned the roof terrace trellis. That's one of the alternates. So we would still have the roof trellis with roofing, but the pavers, the actual steel structure, and I think that's basically the possibility for panels on the top, and the lighting associated with that is all an alternate. The base bid has all of the column base plates and everything ready in, you could add it a year from now, 10 years from now, but everything would be in place. But that's one of the bid alternates. Painting the ceilings inside the parking garage for additional reflectivity is an alternate. It's expensive. It does add to the light quality, but it's something that wouldn't prohibit the garage from being built. Traffic coating on the fourth floor is another one. So it's kind of another belts and suspenders kind of thing, but it's not absolutely necessary for the building to be built. So we wanted to try to have a number of alternates. You don't want to have too many, or it gets too cumbersome and people don't like to bid it that way. But they also have to be large enough to make a difference. We don't want alternates that are $20,000 or even $100,000. We want them to be significant so that the city's in a position to make sure they get a building that works if it's meets the 46, but then have some options to add value or add durability to the project if the funding comes through.
So just so I understand, that what I'm seeing right there right now, that would be the alternate, the added alternate?
Yeah, there's 10 alternates, that's one of them, yeah.
Thank you.
And I can easily send that list around, so you're familiar with it.
That'd be great. Any other comments?
One other thing is thank you for the presentation. It's pretty exciting to, a number of years ago, bringing up the fact that we needed to look at having a new library to almost having one, we have one on screen, and, it'll be exciting to get the ground broken and move forward with the project.
Yes, I'm not looking up at this screen, so Jill, welcome.
So the only thing I would ask the mayor is we're close on our funding. At some point in time, we're gonna have to make a full-on commitment, which means that we would probably have to, at least for the short term, issue a bond, to complete construction on this, or at least to move forward. Doesn't stop us from going out after more grants and everything else, but we have to make a full-on commitment as a council. And I think at some point, in the near future, it'll be important to see what our debt service is gonna be on that, figure out how we're gonna pay that debt service, and at what point do we issue that bond, because we know interest rates have gone up already. I saw my line of credit went up to 0.25%, here in the last couple of days because the Fed's made an adjustment. They're talking about making a couple more adjustments, and how that may affect, how and when we issue those bonds, and how that affects the repayment of those bonds.
Can give one update on the cost estimate. We received the final cost estimate yesterday, and it's in line with our numbers. I always am nervous about opening these emails, but it's right on target, within, a couple $100,000 of our budget, which we wanna make sure, we usually take about a week to go through and fine tune them to make sure they haven't forgotten anything or had any duplicates, so we'll get that back out. We'll make any adjustments to alternates that we need to, and we'll have OAC look at it. We want them to also look at the duration too, to make sure that they're estimating how long the construction's gonna take, with OAC, because we wanna be right about that too. It has general condition implications, it has all kinds of other implications. So, right now, everything looks great, and Brian, the person at DCW who's working on it, has kind of an incredible track record through all of this fluctuation. His estimates are coming in within 1 or 2% of final bid openings. So they're doing well and we're on track. Exciting in this tumultuous market.
Any other comments? Thank you, Julie and team. Doing a great job. Looking forward to it.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Appreciate your time.
All right,
Thank you.
thank you.
Thank you.
Item B tonight is a Mount Vernon Police Department update on the Integrated Outreach Services Program. And here to present that item is Mount Vernon Police Chief Chris Kamick.
Thank you, appreciate it.
Name,
Good evening,
Chris?
council. I'm still clammy and sweaty from earlier.
There's more to come.
Sticking around for round two, aren't you?
I don't know yet. I'm weak in the knees still. I'm even a little foggy here, so I just hope I stay on track. What we wanted to do tonight was to just kind of circle back and refresh you with what we talked about in November when we came forward and initially proposed this concept of where we want to go directionally, both with programmatically within the department around outreach services, but really more of kind of a transformation of policing services for the future. So what I'm hoping to do here tonight again is just kind of give you a recap of what we talked about there, but we've been able to structure the actual budget for what it will cost and talk that through a little bit with the idea that come back before you at a council meeting in 2 weeks for a review and then, kind of formal direction on where to go with that. So, so just kind of go through this again. Part of the why behind what we're trying to do here is that when you take a look at our calls for service, 25 to 27% of those calls typically surround issues like vagrancy, alcohol problems, disorderly conduct, suspicious, welfare checks, person removals. And a lot of those calls, when you take a look at the root causes of them, come back to either behavioral health or substance abuse or a combination of both of those that are there. And not all of these types of calls for service are being driven by criminal intent. They're being driven by the issues that are behind it, and then they're leading to quality of life issues, they're leading to fear of crime issues, they're leading to the things that people are calling us about. And so we're looking at that and saying is the way that we're currently addressing that and doing that the best way or the most effective way to get to the root cause of these problems. In addition to that, well, let me add to that. If you recall, one of the things we did was an informal kind of survey or study internally where we asked our frontline staff to identify individuals that would fit into these categories and who that might be. And we just compiled 46 people in a sample size. And then we broke those into categories of degrees of care, very acute to individuals that are just kind of reticent to get services but need some side of guidance or structure, and then the ones that need real traditional healthcare systems and treatment with that. And what we found from that is just the amount of calls for service that this population of these few people are driving for. And I think the more compelling thing was the fact that when we reached out to one of the major traditional care providers, we found out that 82% of these individuals weren't in that system. So that meant that they were outside the system, which meant that 911 calls were going to fire and police and aid and hospitals. And these folks were navigating their path pretty much on their own unless they were being influenced by somebody along the way like us or fire or medical. In taking a look at the fire department, they were looking at the same concerns. This was talked about back then, but the 4,500 EMS calls a year, about 886 of those calls were related to substance abuse or mental health. So they're experiencing some of the same issues that are there in the treatment, and some of these people are going to the hospitals fairly frequently or taking ambulance trips fairly frequently, and could there be a way to avoid that or try to do a different delivery system to meet that need? Some of the barriers and bottlenecks that we experience in navigating this space is for people to get assessments. They need pre-treatment assessments in order to be able to get into substance use treatment. And those pre-treatment assessments can take days or weeks to do that. And getting the clients, if you will, around the required appointment schedules and things like that to do that is difficult. As Aaron has experienced before, just finding the people again a week and a half or 2 weeks later for an assessment appointment or bed date is difficult. The reimbursement approach is a prescriptive approach, and behavioral problems don't always move in logical ways like you would an illness or an injury that might be occurring. The psychiatric prescriber access, if there's psychiatric treatment that's needed that are there, there's a requirement to have a counselor review first, and those can be an 8-week delay that are out there. So when you think about some of these individuals in where their level of need is, doing that independently or without assistance is almost impossible. And then the psychiatric hospitalizations, and this is something that's better described by Aaron, but this idea that they return to baseline, so there's not a baseline standard that somebody is measured to. The baseline is based off of the individual, and in some particular cases they can return to baseline, then be released, and they're released back out into a homeless situation that's there and that they're having to deal with. We have reticent clients. We have clients that don't qualify for entrance requirements, and that was one of the things that we found, and whether that be because of their treatment history or their ailments or what they have for SSI, they may not require. Clients will remove themselves from the system, and the acuteness of their health can contribute to that. Or they need more care than our outreach coordinators and that can provide. So these are just some of the many bottlenecks that we deal with in trying to problem solve the issues that are leading to those sorts of calls for service that we're seeing on both the fire and the police side. Try to move this, bugging the heck out of it. This is an actual experience that Erin had. She was sitting, I believe, on a street corner with this individual, and I think it just really kind of captures and highlights what it is that we're talking about doing here. But so it's this was the provider on the phone call end and the client sitting there with Aaron. The provider said, "You missed too many appointments, so now you have to do the walk-in appointments. You've been transferred to Jay." Client says, "I don't know Jay. I like Tracy. Why can't I have Tracy?" Provider says, "You've been transferred to Jay. Or you could come during walk-in hours and see Jeff." Client says, "If Jeff is the guy who is getting his master's while working there, I don't want to see him. He's an ass." Provider, "Well, you have to see Jay twice before September 20th or your case will be closed." Client, I will. Please don't close my case. I will get over there even if I have to go over and sleep on the steps." Provider, "You'll have to call on Monday, September 11th to see when Jay's available that week. He works Monday, Wednesday, and Friday." Client, "Now how do I get more meds? I'm out." Provider, "After you see Jay, once I schedule an appointment with Monica, but if you don't make it with Jeff, you can't see her." And so this whole system, if you will, with somebody obviously trying to navigate it without all of the faculties is challenging. This was a depiction that Aaron created that we had in our annual report a couple years ago, and it was one individual's path over about a 2-year period. And again, going from being on the streets to being arrested, to being transferred to a hotel facility, to seeing an assessment treatment provider, but then missing an appointment, a visit, and just how they kind of move through the system. And along the way, over those this couple-year path, there's 190 police contacts. So this was just kind of designed to just again, kind of highlight what we were talking about before, where with these issues, why partnering with social work is just so essential, I think, in part of the way we deliver policing services in the community. So the current state, as you know, we have a single licensed social worker, which is Erin, and she's held that position since 2016. Again, she primarily helps people navigate these courses. And then her casework and caseload time has increased dramatically. And we saw that when we added the internship program. And we saw the amount of capacity that grew from there. And then the interns went back to school or went on to their thing, and then what they started had to go back to Erin that was there. So we've had the ability to, I guess, try and sample a growth in the program, and we've seen where it could go with it. So we know the needs there. And then Erin shared these with you in November, so I just want to recapture them because I think these are just two examples of the success that we're trying to achieve on a broader scale through the program expansion. And again, this is MS and BS. MS was evicted in 2017, had untreated health issues. She was arrested in 2019. She was in a women's program in a nearby shelter. They worked through Erin and a lot of daily visits and client visits and things like that and helping them through the system. And she's next in line for an apartment. In fact, I believe now she's actually in that apartment. Erin was talking about it the other day. But you can see down there on both these cases, outside the system before being involved and connected with Erin, we had 109 police contacts with that individual in 17 and 18, and then in 19, being involved in this program, reduced it down to 7. And if you slide over and look at BS at the very bottom, similar path of problems and issues and navigation that we did, and the difference between 100 and almost 120 calls for service and 10 calls for service related to this individual. So now, are we going to get this with every individual person? No. We're going to have setbacks along the way. We know that are there. But these sorts of problems or issues that we're dealing with, better served by clinical social workers, masters in social work versus commissioned police officers, we think is more effective. So on the integrated outreach services, just kind of the belief systems approach. There's, I guess, two schools of thought. Erin worked under the PersonCentered model in California, and then there's the IllnessCentered model that's there. And she found great success in the PersonCentered model down in California, and that's really the belief system that she uses here in her independent capacity that we want to expand within our program. And just kind of contrast that difference. In a person-centered approach, the relationship is the foundation, whereas in IllnessCentered, the diagnosis is the foundation. It begins with a welcoming outreach and engagement approach, whereas the illness side begins with the illness assessment. Services are based on personal suffering and help under a person-centered, whereas services are based on diagnosis and treatment under an illness-centered. And I think the key here difference is when you take a look at the goals that you're working towards, on a person-centered, you're really looking for quality of life goals in the individual versus illness reduction goals under the illness-centered side. So with all of these individuals, what level of quality of life can we restore it to for them, whether it be employment, self-sufficiency, what they can contribute back to versus, again, how many stays or trips have we reduced to a hospital or an institution that are there. So philosophically, again, we're moving it more on that person-centered. And when I compare it to policing, I take a look back at our own profession, and in the early years, the traditional policing approach was all about crime control, which is kind of like the illness-centered, and it was about sanctions or penalties that were severe enough that did the person learn a lesson to be deterred from future criminal acts. However, what didn't get taken into account with that type of model were things like mental illness, poverty, homelessness, lack of educational opportunities, racial differences, etc., that were contributing to the crime issues that were evolving. And then we evolved into more of a community-based policing philosophy, which is research supported. And it's based on normative sponsorship theory and critical social theory, which basically says, that most people are of goodwill and will cooperate with others to build consensus. People must become educated before they'll rally for change. People must take action to improve conditions, and people can liberate themselves from oppressed situation by action. And that's a lot of, when you look at community policing with what we're doing within our neighborhoods, within our business districts or whatever, is providing people an understanding about the causative factors that go into crime, and dealing with issues of decay and disorder before it actually raises the level of crime, and trying to empower people or understand what their role can be in that. And then when the type of problem or issue is extreme enough or sophisticated enough, that you need policing resources, we come in and do that, but we want to return that level of problem back to something that a neighborhood or a business district or a community can influence themselves. And so when you take a look at the illness-centered versus person-centered, there's a lot of comparability to that. Again, what we talked about is this does model after the LEAD program, which started out of Seattle. We're not embracing all of the LEAD principles that are there, because the LEAD program, if you prescribe to it, you have to prescribe to all of their factors and be in compliance with it. But the idea of care coordination that's there, the wraparound services that LEAD does, the intensive case management, the long-term collaborative care, all of those factors and things like that are incorporated into our program going forward. So again, on the next evolution of this is what we're looking for is to provide public safety response capability in a different way. We're looking at using embedded social workers as first responders. So now maybe a business district who's calling in on a suspicious person who might be slumped in a doorway or passed out, instead of an officer necessarily needing to go to that, we would send a team of social workers to that. And maybe that conversation now isn't just about, hey, you need to move out of the doorway. It's about, where are you at? What are you connected to? How can we help connect you? And then on top of that, relationships with people like Community Action or the Jails program or the Impact Team or the traditional care providers, whether it be Compass or CMAR, any one of those, and trying to connect those services with it. We want to improve the effectiveness of our services that are delivered, and what we want to do is incorporate case management into that. Now, that's not case management from the standpoint that we want to take on, like a mental health provider would be, where they are our client. This would be field case management. So I akin it more to, like, we have detectives that need to spend time on the cases that are more lengthy or more extreme, while we have the patrol officers out making the frontline calls. That's kind of what we're talking about here. We would have the outreach specialists that would be out making those contacts, and then the case managers on that side working to connect with the different institutions and developing care plans that are around the individual that are connected. And then the other piece to this, which is unique, is the nurse practitioner side. And this allows us to have medical resources right out in the field with the social workers. So when we see an abscessed foot or we see an injury or something like that, we can put treatment to it right away. And then in the times that the nurse practitioner may not be necessarily within the outreach team, look at trying to work on the fire side of those calls, where we're identifying those households that have had those high ambulance calls or hospitalization visits that may not necessarily need to be there, and we can do something in a proactive response. We're doing home visitations to those with a nurse practitioner. And in addition to that, the social workers in there who are used to dealing with some of that stuff can complement the nurse practitioner for those fire calls. So doing that kind of home-based medicine type of thing. I don't know. Is that the right term for it, Brian? Close enough?
Integrated mobile health care.
Integrated mobile health care. I like his word better. So again, it's kind of evolving both policing and fire in that direction that we're there. And again, at the end of the day, trying to provide alternatives to the traditional court system and incarceration with these individuals who probably really just need more on the treatment side than they need in the jail side. And that's where they're ending up now. So again, goals: change the capacity and capability for the department, provide an alternative to officer responses by using non-police personnel to these types of calls, and again, using outreach services and intensive case management, and really looking at offering wraparound services to this problem area. And then, again, public safety effectively providing behavioral health responses with the long-term goal of eventually, public health taking back over what public safety is doing now. You've seen this before. This is roughly the structure. We'd have a program supervisor, and then we'd have independent responders, case managers, and the paramedicine problem, and then they would be working through any one of these degrees of care that are there. Again, we know there will be some overlap with the other care providers out there, but we want to try to define roles well enough that we complement each other, not duplicate where we can. So the SCSO impact team, we're already working with them, and they have mental health professionals in a co-responder mode. And then the jail alternatives program, where when they're incarcerated, they've got social workers in there working with them, but when the individual leaves the jail, their kind of role stops. So then our role picks up, and we try to, make some of that seamless to keep that continuity of care going. Again, just some of the parallel public service providers that are there. The partnerships, North Sound Behavioral Health has been fantastic throughout all of this, and show you a little bit. They've just been supportive all the way along and willing to, again, contribute financially with it. Been talking with Jennifer Johnson, Skagit County Department of Health, and also in their way forward about that, and we're excited to contribute to that direction as well. And we've been working with Skagit Valley Hospital too, because they have systems that we can integrate with, we hope, but they also get a lot of these clients through their doors as well, and if we can reduce ER visits, that's a good thing. So on the funding side, just to give you an idea of what the total program cost would be, and these salaries are reflective of the salary survey that Aaron was talking about earlier with that, so they've been built into that's here. So again, this is what the total program costs that we would be looking at with it. But as far as the funding plan would go for this year, what we're looking at is for 2022 is really just a half year, because it's probably going to be at least July 1st before we're probably up and running, because we'll have to do all of the processes. If you give us approval to move forward, then we'll go to civil service and we'll start lining up the permissions there for hiring, and then we've got to do marketing and interviews and all that comes along with it. So we've built this budget on a half-year plan. You'll notice the program supervisor amount is $2,000 or $2,500 basically there. The reason for that is that we already have Aaron's position funded in our police budget, so this is the amount, a little bit more than that, for the program supervisor that's there. North Sound Behavioral Health has agreed to fund areas that accomplish what they're hoping for with, and that's specifically personnel that can do the substance use disorder professional assessments and things, the SUDPs, and then the case manager around that, and then they'll cover some of the relevant program costs that are there with that. So what we're looking at is a request to use the House Bill 1590 money to cover the program supervisor, the case manager, the outreach specialist, and the nurse practitioner, and then the vehicle and some of the related equipment. And then in year 2, or 2023, if you will, some of that, like the vehicle and some of the vehicle equipment, some of the radios and that, they'll drop off. They won't be there next year because they're just fixed costs right now. So that's what we're looking at for 2023. And then, of course, if there's any increases in salaries, that would come naturally, or if we identify some programming. But we would be coming back to you in that through our regular department budget. Doug, did I miss anything? And that's summary, so I'd be happy to entertain. Yeah,
Mark?
Yes, sir.
First off, it believe me, amazes me at the evolution of policing. I've been on the council about 10 years, and we've just seen this evolution where we've become more in the social field than we have actual law enforcement, I guess is probably a poor way to articulate that, but we see the successes that Aaron, our embedded social workers, had. We have a group of individuals out there, they're probably some of the most vulnerable people in our community, that have really been abandoned by the state. State mental health services just aren't provided anymore. We're having to pick up the slack for that, and the county's been in, and you've been working on this program. I'm pretty excited about moving forward with this. Prior to the budget, you and I had met, and we discussed staffing needs, and you had said at that time, rather than adding more officers, we need to look at basically what you said is, hold on, let me put this together and show it to you. So we may be hiring more staff to deal with more in a compassionate fashion with those that need the help, rather than boots on the ground as far as patrol officers. We would hire the staff one way or another. It's just how we're going to deliver the services that these folks need in a compassionate way. And that's what it looks like to me that you've put together as a way to deliver those services to truly get folks help. So the budget really, we were going to spend the money one way or another. We were going to hire more police officers, or we were going to find another way to deliver services. And you found another way to deliver services. So.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, when I started 33 years ago, in fact, I was telling one of our staff that the other day, and I looked at the, who we are, the complexion of the department, and we were pretty much commissioned staff. We didn't even have a CSO at the time, and we hired John Skiffington. And you look at the department today, and you have community service officers, you have park rangers, you have an outreach specialist with social workers in there. You have over 50 citizens that are working in the agency that are there, and the public's demand for wanting agencies to be more community-based. And I can't think of a better reflection of what community-based is if you've got 50 citizens that are working in a department for you. And I think it's a credit to them when you think about it over the years of what they've shown us as an agency, that you give them, the authorities to do and the responsibility that they'll do with it, that has led to the comfort level to say, okay, let's put social workers out there. Because there's part of this that's kind of a nervous feeling for me about putting social workers out on frontline police calls. And I know if you ask our officers, they'll say the same things, because we're used to having vests and guns and things like that. But these are also people that have worked in those types of field, and they've dealt with pre-attack indicators and things like that. So they're very capable, and I think Aaron has demonstrated, along with their interns over the last 4 years, that it can be successful. It won't mean that we won't have unexpected things that come up that we'll have to address or change or adjust, but because of what people have shown us before, gives us the confidence to move forward with it in this realm. So,
Chris, isn't it true that normally when you're sending somebody out on a call, there's been previous contact with that individual, so we already know what their needs are. So the risk of injury to one of our embedded social workers is probably a lot less than it would be, obviously, if we were responding to somebody that we had never had contact with.
yeah, we're trying to do all the things that we can to minimize that risk to anyone out there. So, like, what we envision is they'll work in teams for the most part as a pair. They'll have radio contact just like any other officer, and so an officer will hear the call and things like that, and if they know something about it that the person doesn't, there's ability to directly radio in and communicate. We're gonna give parameters on the types of calls that they go to, and start more conservatively and build from there as we do it. We want to give them the latitude out in the field, so we're not asking for permission on every thing that they go to do, but we also want some governor on that so that they're not put in an unexpected position. We hope that we'll end up attracting people that have a flavor of our local environment and local clients too, which will help to that. But we found even with our new officers, fairly quickly they come up to speed on our clients. So and who they are, and that's what we want to do. So all of those things and more, and then I think the benefit of them being police department employees too is they're around us all the time, and so you're training almost every day. And then in addition to that, we can incorporate them into our training and into our practices that you can't do when you're just with a contracted agency that shows up occasionally.
Listen.
Chris, when you started, I wrote one word down and then I just kept doodling all the way around it, and that was compassionate. Mark said it. This is a reflection on the department and a reflection on our city. And the world could use a lot more compassion right now. And so I applaud you and fully support the 1590 funding, which we can't use more than 40% of, but I believe that funding was designed exactly for something like this, and so I applaud you, the department, and the mayor.
Thank you. Thank you.
I just wanna say thank you for taking care of community and all the hard work you do. And I know we don't do this alone, and just working in team, we can see these results when we work all together. Thank you, Chris.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Yeah, this very exciting. I think we're all really excited to see how it evolves and supportive. And you're still looking at sort of launching late August or late summer time frame. Is that TBD?
Yeah, I'd like to launch tomorrow if I could, but I think I don't get to come back before you till April 13th, and then immediately I'll be asking Aaron if we can get a civil service meeting. So when you think about some of those, and then we could face the same issue some of the other areas have had where, our applicant pool, so we'll have to see. But if everything goes well, it would be great if we had some people on board by the July 1st that we've structured the budget around.
I'm certainly hearing staffing issues in that arena. My wife works in the schools in that program, so it's tough. But hopefully our collapse comp study will help a little bit. And as Melissa said, the 1590 funding seems really appropriate for this activity. I was curious though, I wanted to draw a bit of a connection to the other half of the 1590 program and the housing programs, because I noticed in your barriers and bottlenecks, you didn't describe housing, and homelessness, is first and foremost is a housing problem. And I would imagine, and I'm assumption, but I ask you, without more housing in the city, it's harder for our staff to find, I would assume, to find stability. And I noticed in the person-centered model, housing and homes are essentially that first thing closest to the person, to find that stability. So I don't think it's a question unless my assumption's wrong, except just to put on the record that, how we evolve the other half of 1590 is a housing program, and tie it into both street homelessness and vulnerable people in our community are homeless. If we don't recognize that as a barrier and a bottleneck, then we'll be less successful, I would assume. And we want to tie those pieces together. And I'm really excited that the council has, really teed up 1590 and something that we're just beginning to gather the money from the new tax authority, but it's something that we're really going to be taking a very hard look at and finding ways to use that money as efficiently as possible. And I hope you'll be looking at ways of finding connections for those people who need that stability.
Yeah, by no means was my bottlenecks list exhaustive of everything. I didn't want to, you all know the issues that are out there, and I just wanted to retouch on a few of them. What I think is really fantastic and really innovative that's going on right now is what Skagit County helped us do with this motel program. Because around housing, you gotta, with this type of issue, I think you gotta add the supportive piece with it. Because we found with that just the independence on a lot of these people and things like that can be problematic as well. So with the county stepping up and allowing us to do the motel program that's a transitions into Martha's Place, super creative, super innovative, and gives us a chance to work with some of these issues where housing is actually a barrier too that's with it. And so my credit to Jennifer Johnson, because that was one of the things that came out of our Edgewater work group, that when we had 60 plus people living over at Edgewater, and we were, before the flood moved them, and we were trying to figure out how we were gonna change that landscape over there. It was housing there, and in that particular case, you know, we didn't have options, and we were exploring them, and we talked about motels, and then that went off and stuff, and then, you know, obviously Skagit County came back, and it's where we're at, and so it allows us with first steps that we have, and then we have, you know, this motel program, and then down the road we got Catholic Community Services coming on board with Martha's Place, and again have supportive wraparound services related to it. So that'll contribute to our success.
Thank you, Chief.
Thank you again very much. Appreciate your support.
And the final item on tonight's agenda is item C, the approval of a memorandum of understanding with Washington municipalities for the allocation of use of funds being distributed as a result of a litigation against a pharmaceutical supply chain. Kevin?
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem Gary Molnar. I wish I could take credit for having this on directly after Chief Kamick's program, because this is involving litigation directly with the supply chain of prescription opioid pharmaceutical companies. And I would say that that would be a poster child of this program, of the damages that has been caused by negligent and reckless use of overprescription of opioids in communities throughout the country. What you have before you is a memorandum of understanding. It's not a settlement agreement, but it's an agreement of how funds would be distributed to release the city's claims and the county's claims, of which we're all a party, along with a number of other local governments engaged in litigation against a number of pharmaceutical companies that are involved in the supply chain of prescription opioids, to hold them accountable for the wreckage they've caused to local governments. The allocation model in the memorandum of understanding addresses how the settlement funds intended for local governments would be distributed among them. The model is modeled after a national model of how this is being litigated nationwide in Ohio. And basically what other states have agreed to is to use three factors that address the most critical causes and effects of the opioid crisis. Factor one is you look at the number of persons suffering opioid use disorder in a county. Two, the number of opioid overdose deaths that occurred in the county, and then number three, the amount of opioids distributed within that county. All three are weighed equally, and you use federal data, so no particular county or state can put their thumb on the scale. After that straightforward model, it's allocated by a percentage statewide. Exhibit B shows the percentages in Skagit County. So each county would get a percentage of the settlement, and each city would get a percentage of that based upon these three factors. I do want to note, while Chief Kamick was looking and explaining his new, I think, highly innovative model, the allowed uses for abatement strategies, this fits squarely within that. I mean, verbatim, this model would be, these funds would be used for a model such as this, and many other things. You have about 11 pages of abatement strategies, broad and long ranged, to use. The model is specifically designed not to favor small, medium, or large counties. It's based on not on populations. That's taken into account indirectly because the three factors above each tend to increase with population, but it tries to focus on the actual harm caused by the opioids rather than the population. There's no perfect mechanism here to allocate these, but this model is roughly, in terms of equity, proportional to the harm caused by opioids. The allocation model described would determine how funds will be allocated among counties. The percentages that result are found in your Exhibit B. Skagit County is page B9. We don't know. We haven't engaged in settlement discussions. It's not appropriate to talk about that in this forum. But what this is a non-binding settlement agreement to get to the table what I call the big three pharmaceutical distributors, and Johnson & Johnson, who we all know who Johnson & Johnson is. What they want is basically global peace amongst the states, and they want to see that we have all looked at a sharing agreement that would bring them to the table to have genuine discussions about a potential settlement. But this is not a settlement, we're not there yet, we're not close.
Any questions?
No, it looks like, one is the universal, document, or mutual agreement of understanding. And it looks like it's, if we want to, be able to recoup anything from the, potential settlement, we have to be part of this, this understanding. So, I know Kevin's reviewed it and, looked out for the best interests of the city. And so there's nothing in there that's going to harm the city, only be beneficial to the city. So with that, I would move the adoption of the memorandum of understanding.
I'll second the motion.
Okay, motion by Mark and a second by Juan. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, same sign. Motion passes. Thank you, Kevin. And that concludes tonight's City Council study session agenda. Time is now 8:09. We'll close the meeting.
We need an
After a,
executive session.
nope,
We do not have an executive session.
right, because we were gonna meet after, right. After a 5-minute break, we're gonna reopen the committee of the whole meeting that was extended due to the study session beginning. Thank you.